everyone's spinning it the way they want. There's lines coming out of people close to Keir who are saying Wes broke the first rule of politics, which is learning how to count.
Let's assume for a moment Andy Burnham does come back. It is an Andy Burnham v Wes Streeting contest. The game changes a bit, doesn't it? Because
I still think it's extremely possible we may now have no contest at all.
Angela Rayner, she has not even been found to be careless.
Absolutely.
She has just paid the correct bill. Yep. She's done nothing wrong. So doesn't that put her back in the game?
There is a perception, because he has added to this, that he's a man who has been scheming for this for his entire political career.
That's literally what politics is about.
Not everyone does it quite so nakedly.
Hello and welcome to the Fourcast. We're in Westminster. Where we need vision, we have a vacuum. Where we need direction, we have drift. Wes Streeting resigned from the government with a pretty damning assessment of Keir Starmer's failings. But the former Health Secretary hasn't launched a leadership campaign, instead saying there needs to be a broad debate and implying he wants to see Andy Burnham as one of the candidates. So what happened? Did he have the 80 backers in Parliament he needed? Or are Labour MPs still waiting for Andy? No other cabinet ministers have followed Wes Streeting out, though there is talk of some of them going to the PM to once again press the case for a timetable for him to leave. And then there's Angela Rayner, who with astonishing timing has been cleared by HMRC of even being careless over her tax bill. Is she backing Burnham, or might she run herself? Right now, Keir Starmer's allies are probably quite content that he's seen off Streeting for now. But what next? Our senior political correspondent, Paul MacNamara, is here, and Alison Phillips, chief executive of the think tank Think Labour, formerly known as Labour Together, which was central to the Starmer project. Does its repositioning reflect the shift in Labour politics itself? We will get to all of that in a moment. But Paul, first of all, what happened? Last night we were expecting Wes Streeting to go in, quit and announce that he was standing to be leader of the Labour Party and that Ed Miliband might do the same. But it didn't work out that way this morning. Yeah,
I don't think last night we were expecting an Angela Rayner-shaped grenade to be lobbed into the middle of all this. That did happen at 6:30 this morning, when all of a sudden she done this interview saying, that's it, I've been cleared by HMRC. Wes Streeting was not expecting that. But the wheels were already coming off. I spoke to a Labour MP who was on the Downing Street list of, loyal to Keir Starmer. They got a call from Team Streeting saying, can we rely on your support? That probably tells you
so
that...
we're still trying to get the numbers.
Still trying to get numbers. One of Angela Rayner's allies telling me today they had exactly the same call. So Wes Streeting's people today, God love them, they are putting the effort in saying, we had the numbers.
I mean, these people would say that, to be honest, because they're on the other side. So they're trying to rubbish Wes.
Yep.
And Wes Streeting's people are still saying they do have the numbers, they just didn't want to fire the starting gun yet. Do you buy this, Alison?
I think that there is so many different stories coming out, and as you say, everyone's spinning it the way they want. So at the moment, there's lines coming out of people close to Keir who are saying Wes broke the first rule of politics, which is learning how to count, and he didn't count, and he didn't have the numbers. But I still wonder if there is something around the timing, and that there may yet be one more rabbit out of the hat that we're going to see. That I still think there may be something yet to come from Wes. No, I'm not saying that. I just think that the certainty with which it was being spoken about not so long ago, that there could still be more to be seen.
Like what?
Well, I think that there is a sense that he may have the numbers.
Yes. But what he said in his letter, which is really interesting, isn't it, is, he's done his critique and he's done his haven't I done well in the NHS, and we've got great numbers out today, and so I'm clearly a man who can turn things around. But what he said in terms of the leadership campaign now is that there should be a broad debate. He's sounding a bit like John McDonnell was last week. There should be a broad debate, it should go on for time, and we should have a very broad spread of the top talent, which is basically saying Andy Burnham. Yeah. Why would he be doing that?
Well, if you speak to people in the Wes camp, they say this is a masterstroke by Wes. This morning I was saying, he's a busted flush now, he's lost it. No, this is a master strategy. He can come out now. He wants to be a broad church. He wants to actually win this, not just sort of slip in by default. And, you have it be this big race, do debates with Andy Burnham, and they back him to win any debate going, win over the whole nation. Of course, they would say that because they're on Team Wes.
But this now becomes a long game, isn't it? And we could have a long leadership contest, and let's assume, which is not a given, but let's assume for a moment Andy Burnham does come back, and that it is an Andy Burnham v Wes Streeting contest. The game changes a bit, doesn't it? Because
I still think it's extremely possible we may now have no contest at all.
Yeah.
These things can continue for a very, very long time. And I know that it feels in the media there's been this frenetic energy of this week, but we could get into next week and things could calm down.
What, and we just
and everything.
Starmer stays.
But that could well happen. That is a possibility. But I think if Andy Burnham is to enter a contest, if there is a contest and he enters, then yes, we'll probably be looking closer to conference sort of towards September. And then that would be a very different proposition at that point.
Now, in her interview, Angela Rayner said she doesn't do deals when asked is there a deal with Andy Burnham. Do we believe that?
I mean, things can change. I mean, she doesn't do deals right now, but it could be a long summer. There might be a nice job that is offered were she to come into cahoots with Andy Burnham. So as much as any MP will say, I don't do deals, are you running? I'm not running until they are running. These things are always in play. And Angela Rayner really could be the kingmaker here.
But I mean, everyone's assuming she doesn't want to run against Andy Burnham. Is that based on anything other than a hunch?
I mean, it's a common consensus. You talk to her. Oh, go on. You look like you're about to jump in there.
I just think that there is a general sense that if we do get to a contest, within the membership, Andy Burnham is incredibly popular and would likely win. And there is also a sense, I think, within the membership that they would be looking for somebody like Keir, who they could believe could win a general election.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it puts it really between Keir and Andy.
But wasn't the trouble with Angela Rayner as an idea for the leadership that she would have this tax thing hanging over her?
Yeah.
How could you possibly have somebody standing to be Prime Minister and being Prime Minister who had failed to pay the right tax? This exoneration, I mean, we haven't seen the text, but if it is what she says, it is an absolute exoneration. She has not even been found to be careless.
Absolutely.
She has just paid the correct bill. It was an ambiguous tax law. She's done nothing wrong. So doesn't that put her back in the game?
It absolutely puts her back in the game if she wants to be in the game. And there's always been an assumption that she does by many people. But I think there's also, sometimes she's sort of not necessarily wanted that as much as maybe some of the people around her have wanted that. So I think you can call it deals, or you can call it that there are a lot of people who've known each other for a very long time who, if they felt that they could come up with a structure that worked, they're not all necessarily after the top job in the way that people perhaps always imagine. I know that sounds slightly dull, but I think it's true.
No, I think there is something in that as well. Like, I think there are an awful lot of people look, if you look at the narratives that are out there, it's right. Everyone's killing each other to fight for the top job, right? They all want Keir out. They want the job for themselves. Actually, there is an awful lot of sentiment and feeling out there of, crikey, how are we going to look in the public here? So if there are sensible deals to be done, if there are, okay, this might speed up the process. Okay, this might be something that's more palatable for the electorate and for our membership. That's a sensible way forward.
And also, I mean, I know, and as a speaking former journalist, I'm not criticising anybody, but I know this is obviously journalism as entertainment. But I think you've got to remember that for all the people that we're talking about that are involved in this has all come out of what happened last week at the local elections and what were horrendous results. And everybody is looking to themselves and looking across the party and thinking, what went wrong? How did things go so catastrophically wrong in the space of 2 years? And what do we do? What do we do together to try and come back from that position? And I think
maybe you should go back to Labour together.
Not Labour together. So now we've re-emerged and we're Think Labour, and we're doing a really big piece of work that comes out tomorrow, which is about how does Labour reassemble a coalition that could win at the next election. And there is nothing simple about that. That is not a lurch to the left. It is not a sort of a carry on, the idea of like chasing the right. That's not going to work either. It is a very complicated coalition of bringing people together, and that is going to require lots of different talents, lots of sort of different ideological viewpoints, but finding a way of coalescing.
Yes, I mean, so do you think there has been real vitriol against Wes Streeting in the last few days, a lot of hate, which, as you say, doesn't bode well for the future, where Labour has to work as a left-right coalition in government to actually be effective.
I think that's true, but also I think we have to sort of remember that some of that stuff that gets reposted on Twitter, that could be coming from a very small number of people, but it gets amplified. So the whole thing feels a lot more angry and vicious than it necessarily is. But I think all of that is really, really destructive, and it sends out this message to the wider public that there is this sense of chaos, which is what I think the party really does need to guard against if it's to move forward.
Paul, why is Wes Streeting unpopular with some parts of the party?
There is a clip that is doing the rounds today on social media. Have you seen this one? It's the one from like 10 years ago when they ask a whole bunch of new MPs who's going to be the PM in 10 years' time. And they're all making predictions. And then the last one is Wes Streeting. And he says, I don't know, probably me. I mean, there is a perception, because he has added to this, that he's a man who has been building and scheming for this for his entire political career. He was in student politics. He's always been this game.
I mean,
and
that's
this
his
has always
politics.
been
These are politicians. What are they whinging about?
But not everyone.
It's like, that's literally what politics is about.
Not everyone does it quite so nakedly.
Well, you could argue authentically. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But in terms of sort of where he sits in terms of his politics,
Yeah.
He is. On social media, there are just these armies of people who are going, private health service donations, Palantir, all this stuff.
Yeah.
All of which he has answered and has got an answer for. But why is that a thing that people organise around?
So he's to the right. So he's to the right of the party. He was very much some would call it a mentee of Peter Mandelson, for so many reasons. For the left of the party, Wes Streeting presents issues. Wes Streeting would argue he's not to the right of anything. He is a centrist Labour figure, and actually he's just a man who likes good ideas. And when it comes to those good ideas, when it comes to who's the best person to lead the country, he would argue that he can present a set of plans that will win over the PLP, the Labour MPs, it will win over the Labour membership, and it will win over the British public. In short, he's a chap not short of confidence, and he backs himself.
Yeah, he's more popular with voters than he is with the Labour Party, though, isn't he?
Yes. I think he's widely regarded as like a very good communicator, which he is. He has been effective in health, and there's some real positives there. But then whoever gets that job, or if Keir remains in that job, none of the fundamentals are going to change. We've still got the cost of living crisis. We've still got war in the Middle East. We've still got sort of a growing sense of anger on the streets and sort of the polarisation we see in communities and everything we've seen on social media. So all those things remain. But I guess what I think maybe Wes would think he could do is that he could override a lot of those things and speak sort of directly to the public. But, in terms of whoever gets the role has got to win over the party membership first. And the party membership sort of sits quite differently to the general public. It's more to the left. It's not as far to the left, obviously, it was under the sort of times of Jeremy Corbyn, because a lot of those people that joined the party at that period have left. So that the party membership has shifted. Yeah. So it has shifted, but still, it's still significantly to the left of the rest of the country.
Let's talk about where Keir Starmer is then. He's got to find a health secretary.
Well, he's in Downing Street. Yeah. He's not moving. Yeah. That's where he is.
But he's got to find a new health secretary. Is that straightforward? Does he do a very limited?
Well, Angela Rayner's freed herself up now.
Could he do something as simple as that?
He could. I'm going to hold myself as hostage to fortune here. I would imagine it is not a government department that it would be a natural, or that Keir Starmer would see it as a natural fit for her.
But also, who would want to go into government now with Keir Starmer? Who would want to say yes to Keir Starmer when
there's still an awful lot of people who are incredibly loyal to Keir? I mean, we've seen this week. There's been loads of people on the airwaves who've been very happy to come out and support him, and who actually believe that we'll get through this week. Things will continue. So I think that's very possible. And actually, with every passing hour, it becomes more possible, and his position is strengthened, because at the moment it does appear that he has seen off this current threat.
You're right about the loyalty. Like, there is real anger among the loyalists to Keir Starmer that You look at the backbenchers and you look at the people that have been plotting and scheming, and there was real anger towards them that did you learn nothing from the Tory years? Like all this infighting, all it does is make us look terrible. It makes us look like we're not capable of governing. You might think that someone else might be better for it, but it's a terrible way of going about it. And there are an awful lot of loyalists who are absolutely livid. You have a conversation with them and all sorts of swear words start coming out because they are just fuming that they're now in this situation 2 years in where all of a sudden they look like the same basket case that they perceive the Tories to be.
But it's who gets the blame for that, isn't it? I mean, each side will blame the other for the chaos. The people who want him to go are saying, you could have just gone in a dignified way a week ago and we could have had a quick contest and a new prime minister and all of this chaos and circus wouldn't be here. And he's saying, well, no, you've provoked this.
But I think it's very interesting that like loads of radio phone-in shows, lots of sort of letters that have been going into local CLPs, constituency Labour parties, have been very supportive of Keir and very angry that that all this sort of kerfuffle has appeared. Now, you've got some people that were out campaigning last week who are very angry that they felt that Keir was disabling them on the doorstep. But there are a significant number of people that think this is the last thing we need as we try and regroup and try and use the next 3 years before a general election to sort of set out a sensible direction.
But what is it that they think Labour does need then?
Well, I think what they want is what they've sort of had in some ways, which is like policies that appeal to the left, but they just want that really being proud of the Labour values. That comes out time and time again, because a lot of those voters that have been lost to the Greens, it was a sense that it was because that Labour hasn't been proud enough of the really great things they've done around the renters' rights, around the minimum wage, so lots of that sort of stuff just needs to be owned and sort of really felt proudly. And then the other sort of stuff is on delivery, so that people who are more sort of transactional voters that will come in if they feel there is real sort of progress on cost of living, if there's progress on small boats, and there's progress on the health service, which we are now seeing. So it's those things. It's either values and it's delivery, all kind of like brought together with a coherent story, will be enough.
So how do people like you in think tank world, who are very important in terms of feeding ideas for policy into government, how do you work out what your position is? Because Labour Together, which is what you were, was instrumental in sort of drumming the left out of Labour politics and getting rid of all the Corbyn legacy. Morgan McSweeney was, your predecessor and all the rest of it. And now you're saying we need to be both pleasing the left and the right.
So, well, I think that's because we are now a completely different organisation to the one that we once were. So
the party's no longer together. Labour's no longer together.
No, I don't. I don't think it's that at all. So I think
you've got a lot of the same people,
no, we haven't. I mean, I don't think we've got anybody who was there 2 years ago. So Morgan McSweeney was there back in 2018. So you're talking about some fairly distant history. I joined in just before Christmas, and we are basing where we are now on all the research and all the polling and all the data that we have, and we are basing our thinking on what is necessary to get another Labour government that can really sort of create the change that people have endlessly been saying that they really want to feel in their lives. And so in terms of creating that policy, we've identified these three groups, which is the people that really sort of feel that they want to see their values demonstrated. We've got people who are economically insecure, which, a lot of those people have been lost since the last election. People who are either unemployed or got less than £1,000 in savings, so life quite precarious. And then we've also got the transactional voters who want the waiting lists down and they want the cost of living dealt with. So by just focusing,
that does sound like a shift left. No?
Does that sound like a shift left? To be honest, does it matter if it's a shift left or a shift right? This is the thing I think I just think there's this obsession.
That's what people say
there's an obsession.
When they don't want to admit
no, it's not. Well,
what direction they're moving.
No, because there is an obsession with this spectrum in politics about where exactly everybody must line up in some kind of like almost like a child's game of height. Whereas actually, if we looked at what the voters are telling us that they want, and then we work back from that point to create the policies, and then we create a vision that can sort of bring all those people across the country together, that is very doable. And this idea that we're now living in a sort of a fractured politics, that is the case at the moment, but it doesn't have to be the case next year, the year after, the year after. Because the thing about having a volatile voting is that it can change again.
Doesn't the polling you're looking at, though, also say that Keir Starmer is the most unpopular Labour leader, Prime Minister, going back quite some time?
Yeah, well,
so
I think that's kind of interesting.
Around?
I do think that is interesting because how much of that is him as a person, or how much is that of him representing everything they're angry about this government for? So that brings you back to the point where you could have almost anybody in that job at this moment in time, and they could be equally unpopular.
Yes.
So until you start fixing the things that people are worried about, you're going to struggle to be popular.
I mean, I'm sure there's some truth in that, because otherwise, why would every Prime Minister be more unpopular than the one before?
Yeah.
But he's also not very good at presenting himself. He's not a great speaker. He's not a charismatic man. And that was a strength in a world where you were following Boris Johnson and all the madness and all the rest of it. But what people say now is they want somebody who can lead. They want somebody who can inspire. Can he be that?
I think we've seen he can do it at times. I think it's the consistency. I think it's about him having. There's this whole thing, hasn't there, the last sort of few months of let Keir be Keir, which has sort of been more successful, I think, rather than if authenticity is the currency of today, which is sort of his. I think we have to then accept that Keir will be authentically him, and that might not be, the razzmatazz of Boris Johnson or someone, but the more that he could be doing it his way, I think the more effective that could be.
Do you really think you'll get the chance, or that Keir will get the chance to do it his way? Because I've been getting text messages all day from different people from different camps, and everything that's played out today is either genius by the person that they back or lunacy from the person that they don't back. But the one thing that I'm getting back consistently from everyone is
agree.
This is not sustainable.
Yeah.
So, let Keir be Keir, that might all work out, but we've got Lord knows how many MPs have said they've lost their faith in him. We've had 4 junior ministers stand down. We've got a cabinet member now standing down, and everyone's saying this is not sustainable. So
I think it is obviously incredibly hard for it to be sustainable. I mean, obviously, but I don't think it's impossible at all. And I think because we've now reached this point of a sort of impasse that there is more road, and we may yet see something else. But I think it all going to sort of come back to Andy Burnham and what happens next.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, what happens next is he's got to find an MP who's prepared to give up their seat, and that he's then got to win it. Mm-hmm. That's not an easy task anymore, is it? Because Reform and the Greens will say, look at this establishment stitch-up that you are supposed to rubber stamp and just give them the Prime Minister that they want, that Britain isn't being asked what it thinks. It's a very easy sort of anti-establishment campaign from both left and right, isn't it? To say, screw them up.
Yeah. And
don't give them what they want.
You look at the local elections last week in Manchester, there were big Reform advances and there were big Green advances. Reform will pour goodness only knows how much resource into fighting that campaign. And then, of course, there's the risk of if there's an election for the Greater Manchester Mayor, that what if that were to go Reform? So that's a real worry as well.
And Andy Burnham could be blamed for that.
Yes.
Yep.
Are they worried about that?
Yeah, I got a text message from a mischief-making Labour backbencher who's saying there's every chance by the close of when all this is said and done that Keir Starmer says, right, I'll fight whoever comes. Wes Streeting finally does launch a campaign but doesn't get to 81 MPs. Andy Burnham finds a seat but he loses that seat. And the end result of all of this is Keir Starmer's still in number 10, but the party looks more and more damaged.
I mean, the other scenario might be the timeline of what Keir Starmer's orderly timetable might be, were he to agree to one. Because what he could do is say, I will let Andy Burnham come back after he's completed his term of office in 2028, which would be a good year before there has to be a general election. He could imply that that's when he will go. And if Andy Burnham comes back into Parliament after 2028 and then wants to challenge me, then yes, we'll have a leadership election.
I mean, it's a very uncomfortable couple of years until that 2028 timeline is met, though. I mean, we have to look at how frenetic and how uncomfortable the last 2 days have been, let alone the next 2 years.
Do you think that's plausible?
I think it would be difficult, but I think it's possible. I think if we get through to the sort of the beginning of next week and nothing else has happened, I think that is kind of possible. I think what will be interesting at that point is if Angela comes back into health or wherever else, I think then there would be a sense that some of those anxieties from the people further on the left were being met, and that might steady the ship. I think that'd be the way that would steady things.
What do you think about everyone's total reluctance or fear of being the challenger? Tells us, I mean, this is such an age-old adage, you know, if you wield the sword, you don't wear the crown. Does it really exist anymore as a thing? Is it the right thing to fear? And don't they all just risk looking weak? Do you want to?
Yeah, so I think that's clearly everybody that's in this melee has said some version of, I would stand, but only if somebody else triggers it.
Yeah.
So, which I think sometimes to the outside world just looks a bit like cowardice. You think, right, you either want it or you don't want it. And I can understand that there's anxieties around how it's perceived, but that's really sort of really just perceived amongst those, you know, their friends and colleagues that they've worked with for many years. So that's, but I think that then you can reach a sort of point of stalemate where maybe then you think, right, okay, well, we're just going to have to make it work as effectively as we can where we are now.
Because as things stand, it looks like the person who is being expected by everybody to challenge is Andy Burnham.
Yeah. Although he's the person who can't challenge.
Yes.
He has no way in hell of challenging. Unless Andy Burnham's sort of the man, really, who can only become the Prime Minister if he's effectively already become the Prime Minister. If he's already won over all of the MPs, if he's already won over the membership, and he already has basically everything stacked up in favour of him, so he can present it to the NEC, the ruling body of the Labour Party, as, look, I'm the guy, I've got everything stacked up for it. There you go, I'm in.
The quirk in this whole tale, which we should probably just wonder about for a moment, is Al Khan's.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Al Khan's is this man nobody had heard of until 5 minutes ago, but he's a very accomplished guy. He was a Marine, Special Forces, came into politics late on in life.
Climbed Everest in a week.
Yeah.
Has got lots of sort of, you know, stories about bullets going off and lives being saved. And he's written this article in the New Statesman about politics and leadership and his vision.
He has, yeah. He look, and he has got a team of MPs who really do have a lot of faith in him and back him.
When you say a team,
there's a group of MP. I mean, it's mainly 2024 intake. He's really seen as like their guy, the person. We've been overlooked. We need someone to represent us. Will he really be a serious candidate? Possibly not. One of the things they also say about him is that one of the benefits he's got is because nobody really knows an awful lot about him. No one really knows an awful lot about his politics. So he's almost like this blank canvas that you can project your own politics onto. So that whole thing of like, who can unite the left and the right? Well, this guy can, because no one knows where he is really on that spectrum.
but he's a man who's got absolutely no experience of politics. And how politics actually works.
Oh, you're
and
such
how
a
you build
traditionalist,
coalitions,
Krishnan.
and how you run governments. And that's quite important, isn't it? Isn't that what we've learned from Keir Starmer? That if you're not a natural politician and you don't know how to corral MPs, you get into trouble quite quickly.
I don't know that it's quite as simple as that, in that I think there are obviously some skills to politics which are different to any other walk of life. But there are some people who are able to pick those skills up and run with it. And I think, and obviously leadership is such a huge part of that. And I think that he could probably demonstrate that he's been a very good leader in the past, and he could be, you know, he's got leadership qualities. So he's an interesting person to have in that mix. I thought that was an interesting piece that he wrote in the New Statesman. He sort of talked about, you know, growing up in a council estate in Aberdeen. He's got an interesting backstory. I think he exudes strength, which is kind of interesting in this sort of world of the strong man in which we're currently living. Whether he's got the kind of the thinking, I think that's the interesting bit about what he actually thinks we need to do to heal the problems of the nation. There wasn't a lot in the
article about what he actually thinks.
Yeah, but then maybe that was part one, maybe part two, who knows?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what are people sniggering about it? Or?
No. They're not sniggering about it. Like, he is seen as a candidate. You're always going to have a left field candidate that that comes in there. And
Like Jeremy Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn was. You know, he is an impressive guy.
Case in point, a man who knew how to organise better than anybody else.
Or the people around him knew how to organise better than anyone else. But yeah, so look, I don't think Al is going to be the man that ends up marching into Downing Street. Although if it would, it'd be more like a military coup then, wouldn't it?
He could be the man who actually stands up and challenges, I suppose. But from what you're saying, 81
MPs feels like a stretch.
Yeah, big ask.
It feels quite punchy.
And he too has said that he won't do it if Keir Starmer's in the contest. So.
And is there anyone else we haven't thought of who might fancy a run?
There's no one else that we haven't that might fancy a run. The one thing that we haven't mentioned is the people that are really cock-a-hoop today. I bumped into one of them around there. Reform.
Yeah.
You know, yesterday we found out that Nigel Farage's £5 million gift to pay for his security will be looked into. It didn't get anywhere near as much coverage as it may have otherwise. I bumped into someone from Reform around the corner a moment ago. They are cock-a-hoop. You take the afternoon off and gone to the gym, because the point they were making is if your enemy is making mistakes, you don't stop them. You stand back, you let them do it.
And to be fair, I think so much of what we're seeing at the moment is because last week and the local elections was this horrible, vivid presentation of what the future could be, unless there is not a compelling argument against reform. But everyone has got a slightly different idea about how you go about tackling that, whether we need stability and we need to get on with the job, or whether actually we need to sort of start from scratch. And that's the challenge.
Balance, I would say Reform's it's not a horrible vision. It is an alternative vision.
I can't go with horrible thing.
Just finally, I mean,
that's from me.
Because you mentioned it with Al Khan's, that he's got this sort of 2024 intake sort of behind him a bit. Isn't that the other division that is maybe, you know, poking around the corner in the Labour Party? That there's quite a lot of irritation with these new MPs, many of whom are the vocal ones demanding Starmer goes.
This is the problem with having such a whopping great big majority, right? There's an awful lot of people who, you know, were quite impressive in their lives beforehand. They come to politics, they think they're going to end up helping run in the country, and actually they end up as a backbench MP. It's not quite as glamorous as they hoped. They thought they'd be, you know, 2 years in, maybe they'll have some position, and they start jostling. And a lot of the anger that you hear from people who are fiercely loyal to Keir and people still in government posts is these guys just need to cop on.
Cop on?
So it's an Irish term. Sorry.
I know what copping off is.
Sorry. All right, easy, Tiger. Sorry.
Alison Phillips, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Come back and we'll talk about the think tank in more detail.
Think Labour.
Next time.
Yeah.
Think Labour. Paul, thank you. That's the forecast for today. Until next time, bye-bye.